System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Wednesday, June 4th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Emoja, hello. Happy Wednesday to you, my friend. How are you doing?
Yo, I know some of y'all wondering why it's Wednesday and not Tuesday. As we're going to get into, man, I just needed a little bit of extra time to see what was even going to happen. So, pensive, aware, cautious.
I never said we had a schedule just for anyone who'd be like, oh, you guys are releasing on this day or that day. No.
We do the best we can.
We do what we can here or there. We're giving you guys multiple. So anyway, I know you guys are, we appreciate y'all for watching, and we appreciate, us for, hearing us, because what we think is, obviously what we saying we think is very important. The stakes are very high. And as we can see, and you see that the title of the episode here, this war in Ukraine that is supposed to be sort of coming to a close, which at least that's what Donnie J has said is not happening. I think that was a high hope in general, but this was a few days ago. I'm going to put this up on the screen. There was a massive drone bombardment on Ukraine, hitting major bombers and stuff like that. I'm just going to go ahead and put this video up on here.
Смотри, что творится, я не знаю даже, что это сейчас взорвалось.
Оце так файно виглядає зараз аеродром Білая. Стратегічна ворожа авіація.
And that's just for anybody who's not able to watch us, is showing footage of those drone strikes and the bombers that they hit. I believe they were nuclear capable bombers. What do we know about yesterday? Or what do we know about the drone strikes that hit, and what did they hit, and what does this mean?
So it's a couple of things that are going on that are, I think, really important to focus on, right? One, as you said, a lot of what was hit were part of Russia's so-called nuclear triad, right? Every country that is a peer opponent or near peer of the United States of America has what is called a triad nuclear delivery system. That means you're able to deliver nuclear weapons by way of missiles like ICBMs, the scariest thing of all. Nuclear submarines also have delivery capacity, and then there are long-range strategic bombers, right? The United States has the same thing. In fact, they're called Strategic Air Command. They're the guys that, they call themselves the tip of the spear, right? And so what that is one of the three ways that Russia might choose to deliver a nuclear weapon. One of those methodologies was attacked. Now, a couple of things that come to mind, right? People are like, "Oh, Russians are so dumb. Why would they have their stuff out?" They have their stuff out because they're contractually obligated, because they formed a treaty with the Americans called the START Treaty, which deals with how you display nuclear capable assets. At all times, the Strategic Air Command has their B-52s out and all of that, so they can be observable from satellite, so that no country's trying to nuke you, right? Russia is under the same obligations. So this wasn't some super clever thing that the Ukrainians did. It was actually very domestically problematic, because what it goes to show is, once again, the danger of making contracts with the West and with the United States. What the United States is able to say with some degree of plausible deniability, because no one will ever know what Trump knew, though there's rumors that Pete Hegseth was watching these attacks live, right? So it's hard to believe that the Department of Defense knew, but the president didn't know, but not impossible, right? What that means is the Americans allowed the Ukrainians access to their satellite data. The Ukrainians then saw where all of these strategic bombers were located and launched, I have to be honest, a very daring raid where they had these trucks that were being driven by regular people. They didn't even know they were being pulled into a military operation. Then when they drove within certain amount of miles into close proximity to these military bases, drones just came out of the payloads and started going for these Air Force bases. Now, again, you can argue, why wouldn't the Russians have incredible air defense and all of these kind of things? Yeah, I mean, that's what you have to hold on the Russians, but what I would remind people is, and this goes to why the Russophobia doesn't make sense. Russia doesn't have the Soviet Union strength. Like, that's been the joke all week, is like, this could have never happened in Stalin's Russia, because Stalin would have fucking killed people that made this kind of a glaring mistake, right? The Americans said all the time, trust but verify, right? So the Americans would have probably still had air defense in these kind of places, and they could afford to do those kind of things. These battles happened so far away from the field of contact that Russia probably felt like no one would have the audacity to attack them there. Now, what I do have a problem with as it relates to all of this is how they set it up. First off, they implicated people that had no idea they were being drawn into a military operation. These are regular truck drivers just driving loads, and to set all of that up, there was a terrorist attack on a commuter non-military train that led to the death of several regular Russians that were not in the military, right? And so, like, now that everybody's distracted and everybody's looking at this terrorist event that happened with the train, that's when they launched their so it's a 1-2 punch. It's draw the attention over here and then launch the real attack, which in that context then makes all of it a terrorist activity, because you're utilizing the blood of these dead civilians to bring down the guard of the Russians.
Yeah,
to wrap up, it makes the world less safe, because it makes people understand now, don't show the Americans. Hide it. Never admit what you have. This is the Muammar Gaddafi principle all over again. As soon as he declared, I'm going to give up, all of these weapon systems and allow you guys to come in and inspect and verify. Same thing with Saddam. The West goes in and then they kill you. This is why North Korea didn't tell anybody anything. And they did what they did. They're called a pariah state because they wouldn't allow the West to violate them and destroy them. The way that they've destroyed Libya, the way that they've destroyed Iraq, the way that they've destroyed Afghanistan, North Korea wouldn't allow that. And, Russia's tried to play a double game, where we want you to see that we're forthcoming and we're not the monsters you think we are. Look, you can, and the West is just continuing to exploit that. And Zelensky said that it was a 18-month op. So it went all the way back to the Biden administration.
Yeah. And we hear that this is supposed to be, sort of keeping Ukrainians safe, right? But we're watching them commit, like you said, terrorist acts, having them hit these possible like nuclear capable bombers, because it's a treaty that says you got to have the bombers so we can see them, so we know you're not going to do a surprise nuclear attack. So they're breaking sort of that military taboo, and that is kind of another way, like you said, making the world so unsafe.
Yeah, what the Ukrainians would say is, we didn't make that deal with the Russians. Again, it's just too cute by half.
Yeah, it's just semantics for them. They think that they can sort of rely on the Western, rule of law, or what do they call it? Rules-based order, right? That's the rule. Well, it's not the spirit of what's happening. And, when you're hurting and killing civilians and blowing up infrastructure that is supposed to be safe under these treaties, and you're breaking these treaties, that does not make your country safe.
And America understands the implications, right? Because this is what they're always afraid of. Technology transfer, right? They're always afraid the Russians are going to transfer technology to the North Koreans or to the Iranians, right? And this is literally what they're doing. Like, every accusation is a confession. This is technology transfer. You're allowing the Ukrainians access to sensitive, top secret information that's shared only with the Americans out of contractual obligations, and you're allowing the Ukrainians to hit something, which is, by the way, always been the Russian fear. I mean, that was what made this entire military operation happen. The Russians saying that NATO was going to use these Eastern Bloc nations, Iron Curtain nations, as a launching point for war into Russia. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I want the title sort of Ukraine is becoming this endless war, and like I said, we are hearing all the time we're supposed to be keeping Ukrainians safe. We're here for them, but these things are not keeping them safe. Now, one of our favorite,
it's important to be always
one of our favorite buddies here. This is Annalena Baerbock, okay, and she is. She's here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see. She's the former German minister, right? Foreign minister. And now she's the head of the EU.
Of the United States General Assembly. Yeah.
Oh, well, she is, at least is what this says, ran unopposed. So this is her right here talking about the exact thing that we were speaking about.
If I give the promise to people in Ukraine, we stand with you as long as you need us, then I want to deliver, no matter what my German voters think, but I want to deliver to the people of Ukraine. And this is why, for me, it's important to be always very frank and clear. And this means every measure I'm taking, I have to be clear that this holds on as long as Ukraine needs me. We are facing now a winter time where we will be challenged as democratic politicians. People will go on the street and say, we cannot pay our energy prices. And I will say, yes, I know. So we help you with social measures. But I don't want to say, okay, then we stop the sanctions against Russia. We will stand with Ukraine, and this means the sanction will stay also in wintertime, even if it gets really tough for politicians.
Sort of, what is your reaction to that,
So how's that democratic, right? Like, she's literally saying, I don't care about the will of the people, right? No matter what the German electorate say. And this is what's pushing them into the arms of right-wing people like the AfD party. Right. And again, think about the implications of this, as this person is now the president of the United Nations General Assembly. Right. So this, they're taking that mentality, that fundamentally undemocratic principle into the United Nations, and every bill, everything that comes across is going to have that bias tied to it. So you know what to expect from this. The other thing I would say about that is when she's talking about if times get hard. So what's missing in a lot of that is the context. When she's talking about sanctions on Russia, Russia was, up until this war, the largest energy provider of petroleum and natural gas to Europe. Europe, as most people know, is woefully hydrocarbon inadequate and has to import all of that to make their way of life possible. Okay. Russia has so much natural gas. They were just pumping it by the more than the boatload. That's what the pipelines were like. That was what they were for. And so when they allowed those pipelines to be destroyed, right, and then they blamed the Russians for blowing up their own pipeline, that was the natural gas that was deeply undercut, right? Because Russia has always had a soft spot for Europe, contrary to popular belief. To put it to you in comparison, once they cut off that natural gas flow and the Americans had to compensate, the American compressed natural gas is 2 to 3 times higher, right? So we're not even talking about inflation anymore. We're talking about your burger used to be $8. Now your burger is $32. And they're like, well, we're not going to cut the sanctions off. We'll just give you some social benefits, like a coupon. You giving me a coupon on something that went up 3 times? Like, I can't, it's not like real wages went up 3 times, right? So this is a way where the European people are being disenfranchised, right? Economically disenfranchised and disincentivized from their own politicians just to keep this money grab of a war going on. And it's said under the auspices of, oh, we're doing this to protect the Ukrainian people. But the people haven't been able to speak about this. Like, it's easy to forget that Zelensky was in power when Trump was in power in his first presidency. This man has survived Trump's first presidency, through all of Biden's presidency, now into Trump's second, because he will not have an election because he knows he doesn't have the will of the people. He keeps this war going on because he's terrified of what the people will do to him when this war ends, and Annalena Baerbock is able to put it out there like, I'm doing this for the good of the Ukrainian people. Ukrainian people they're more disgusted with this war than the Russians at this point, because the Russians are winning. You put up with a war when you're winning. And even this attack, as embarrassing as it is, because that's what it is, it's embarrassing. Okay, but you didn't destroy every nuclear capable bomber. What you did was you actually made the world more dangerous, because past all that contract talk, why are we doing this on Wednesday? I didn't want to put out a broadcast Monday or Tuesday and find out on Wednesday the Russians went and destroyed Lviv, in retaliation. I wanted to wait to see what was going to happen. Now, as once again, the Russians are allowing cooler heads to prevail. But again, if you're reading the tweets of their leaders, if you're not reading what Putin is saying, read what Medvedev is saying. They have not forgotten. Lavrov had a person-to-person phone call with Marco. There still hasn't been a government readout on that, so you can assume it was a lot of cussing that went on. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one even knows what the Russian response to this will be, because this is very dangerous. And this is not the first time that the Ukrainians have done things ostensibly to affect the Russian nuclear capacity. You'll remember earlier last year, they had attacked one of the nuclear long-range radars. These are not even air-to-air radars. These are used only for the detection of nuclear weapons. So, like, why would Ukraine ever hit such a target? You know what I'm saying? Except to demonstrate to NATO, we can take them. They're daring the Russians to nuke them. That's where we are right now. And it's hard to not see the American footprint in that again, because again, understand, American military might is at its capacity. It's not going to be able to get much bigger than it already is without doing a draft. And then you'll have all of the problems that they're having in Ukraine. If the military stays the size that it is, it's already overcommitted with all of its obligations all over the world. And the only way the Americans at this point have left to project to the world power is a nuclear strike, if they don't want to do it first. If Russia nukes Ukraine, it opens the bottle and everybody can do it now. And I think in a large way, this has been part of what the Russian patience has been about, because they don't have to rush to make a hasty decision. Again, they're winning the war.
Yeah, I mean, and then the whole thing was, and I know I say this every time we talk about Ukraine, the whole thing was Donald Trump said he was going to come in, he was going to change everything. It was going to stop the war. It was going to come to a close. He was Putin's buddy. And guess what? All the liberals ran with it. They said, look, he's in Putin's pocket. He's Putin's puppet. The little cartoons, the little liberal cartoons with him and Putin got his hand up there, and all this silly stuff that we had to hear from liberals.
Yep. I'll go one step further. Remember, it wasn't too long ago, even Trump was calling Zelensky a dictator. Like, that was not years and years ago. That was like a month and a half ago. And everyone forgets, like, it's because you hate Trump, right? Which, fair business, whatever. But that does a broken clock is right twice a day, man. Like, Zelensky has held power unofficially by having military, what do you call it? It's martial law. He has enacted a martial law campaign that has seen him extend his presidency more than a year and a half past when elections were. Now, all of you people out there rooting for Zelensky, just don't say nothing when Trump does it, right? I mean, that's the number one thing I hear from liberals right now. Oh, Trump is going to be president forever. There are people in Ukraine that are far more terrified that Zelensky's never going to leave than you are of Trump.
And Zelensky is a dictator. like you said, he's not elected anymore. That was a while. It's been a while since you had an election. And, you know, we heard Adelina say, oh, we're democratic countries. Okay, we got to stick with the democratic.
Putin had an election. Won quite convincingly by a significant amount. But hey, for all y'all that think it was a rubber band race, remember, the party that came in number 2 was the Communist Party of Russia. So
communists.
Maybe you guys want the communists to win. I mean,
I do too. I'm actually look. The funny thing is, because I would rather have the communists, but that's not going to happen. I know that it's not going to happen.
So it's far behind, bro. Like
they're at 18%,
20%. Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe less than that. So
Putin is just destroying them. In
the hyper capitalist party is like 3%, dude. Like there's no way. Anyway, yeah. And it's just it's destroyed the people of Ukraine. It's destroyed their ability to really be a country again. There's all this conversation sort of surrounding Ukraine about, you know, are they going to make it? What is it going to look like after this? Well, this war doesn't look like it's going to end. It doesn't look like it can end. And it doesn't look like the head of the snake, the monster that is the West, is going to let this go. And it doesn't matter if you get a president that says, well, I don't like it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It does what? Oh, everything happening. Oh, Netanyahu doesn't want to end it. Remember that whole thing he was saying about, I talked to a boss, seemed like a pretty reasonable guy, you know, and then here we go. We're right back here on this, you know, at this point, we're calling it the Holocaust, you know, the Holocaust in Gaza. And when you have the worst people you've ever known, the worst people alive in charge, you get some horrible things. And I'm going to just show you, this is my last video for you. I want you to take a look at this. Okay. Cause you were talking about the Ukrainians and, you know, their recruitment issues. They know they got recruitment issues. They know they have problems. And, you know, at this point, there isn't much they can do. So here we can see, this is like an Uber Eats driver or whatever the Uber Eats is in Ukraine, and no sound on here, but what we're watching is 2 men in like military garb. A man's kind of pulling out this little Uber Eats pizza bag, this keep it warm bag. You know, they're taking a look at it. They go, oh, we actually don't need that bag. They put it to the side. They say, come here with us. And he's already kind of getting out. He knows it's a setup.
Stomach, they're grabbing him.
Oh,
it's
straight strong arm
action, dragging the man off.
Straight strong arming.
I thought liberals believed in consent culture. I wonder what kind of a training this man, who probably was a Starbucks barista, who just wanted to order some food tonight, gets grabbed up, punched in the stomach, and dragged off to conscription camp. And this is what's happening. Once again, this is a class issue too, because you know who this isn't happening to? The rich people's kids. Because they can pay. The bribery in Ukraine is so off the charts that if you can come up with $3,000 to $5,000 American dollars, your kids can, you know, leave. You know
it's
what
this
poor kids of Ukraine.
You know what this reminds me of? Do you remember in Gangs of New York, where everyone was getting, you know, it was the draft, and someone was like, "Well, you can get out of the draft for $200. $200. It might as well be $2,000." You know, and that's why that riot happened in New York, because the rich kids were not getting drafted. They were all paying, you know, to get out of it. And all the poor people were going. And I'm not saying that there's going to be a huge riot in Ukraine, because there's already been a few of those. And there's already a lot of people that are
pulling up on these recruiters. People are pulling up. We've talked about it before on these episodes, driving up on mopeds and gunning these recruiters down. You know, mothers are doing it because you cost them their kids. But you know who's not having any problems at all recruiting? Russia. Russia's actively turning kids away. Nah, we're good. We're at more than our quota. Because every time you get one of these silly attacks somewhere in the far reaches of Russia, all you're doing is you're cauterizing in the Russian culture, that mentality that Putin has said for so long, the West is here to destroy us. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, and the war is not
a democracy. It's not a democracy if you're grabbing kids up off the street that think they ordering cheeseburgers and you're sending them to Kursk to die.
Yeah, doesn't this look bad? Like, I mean, we all are seeing this happen in the United States. The ICE officers sliding up, taking somebody, no identification, no due process, nothing like that. I mean, this is happening. And again, how can you not care? If you care about the Ukrainian people, which you're the president,
It doesn't look like the things that the good guys do,
president.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. I mean, and look, this is not the first video we've seen. We've seen people get taken off the bus, mothers, punching the recruiters and pushing them off. And, they're getting thrown into these meat grinders. There's really no other way to talk about it with a professional, well-equipped, well-rested, blooded Russian army at the top of its game. And you continue. I mean, we were just talking about, all these nitty gritty, get into the weed stuff, the Sumy region. They needed to move some troops, to one place. And that was Russia's plan. They're just waiting to take land right in the Sumy region because that's their goal. It's not about blowing up trains. It's not about blowing up planes that we're probably not going to.
With military force,
and
which the Russians can do.
Exactly. That's the difference between what's happening with the Ukrainian military and what's happening with the Russian army is we're coming in and we're taking this land and we're going to build a buffer zone. I don't think that there's at this point any other, reason to say they want to get to the Dnieper. They want to create a buffer zone. And if the war continues, which I have a sneaky prediction that it will, they're going to go, like you said, they'll go all the way to Kyiv, all the way to Lviv. They'll go all the way. And
the longer
I don't
Ukraine
think
waits to make a deal, the worse it's going to be.
And it's already really bad.
Yeah, I just don't see anything that can change that right now. The way that the Russian military is moving across the entire battlefield, right? We're talking about thousands of kilometers of space, right? Just moving in. Wherever the Ukrainians move troops away from, the Russian troops move in to fill that gap, and they're reaching a critical point where, and this is why the West has been so hardcore, right? Nothing that they do is genuine. This is why they've been so hardcore about wanting to get a 30-day ceasefire so they could restock the Ukrainians who are getting destroyed and sneak in all of these NATO troops as peacekeepers, right? But how are you a peacekeeper if you ain't on, you only on one side? And the Russians are too smart for that. They're like, hey, we're not telling you can't bring them in. Bring them in like you've been bringing them in as your mercenaries, and we'll keep Iskandering them. And that's what's happening. You just recently had the general in charge of the ground forces resign after such a strike last week. You just walked away from it, Like, you want to blame me for losing, but it's really the president, and it's just going to keep getting worse. I don't want to be tied to this no more. It reminded me of Valkyrie, that movie Valkyrie, The generals are getting sick of this. We've talked about it on the show. Generals are saying, when this war ends, I think we're all going to go to hell. Like, these are the things that the Ukrainian high command is saying right now. And if you look at Zelensky in the face, he does not seem to be a rational man. Always sniffing on his nose, always look like he a little bit not quite there, tooting.
Let me know who Vladimir and Elon, who's their plug, man?
Yeah,
they got a variety of items.
You've seen it on the train.
Macron got it all.
West, man, the decadent West. All of these guys are on cocaine.
Cocaine.
I think it's funny that maybe the only person in the West that's not doing cocaine is Donald Trump. He's on his Diet Cokes. He doesn't do drugs because his brother did drugs. But all of your friends do drugs, buddy.
It is pretty crazy, He has like these weird I'm not going to get talking about Trump.
Yeah,
Someone hit us on the DMs today and they're like, you guys enabled Trump by making the G side all about Kamala Harris. I'm like, okay, guys. Okay. That's not going to work. You got to come with something better than that. Hey, but look, this is what happens. Location. Right. Hey, look, they just want to wear us down.
Me in my face, man. Tell me about what a horrible person I am.
No. It wasn't a person. Face. It was a little bot on a phone somewhere that I know. A bot can't say it to your face, man. Unfortunately, because it's not
it's Coach Habib.
Send location to your bot farm. That's the true most. Hey, look, maybe they were real. I don't know. Probably not. Wow. Let's talk about our let's talk about where we can. Let's talk about our podcast listeners, okay? Because our podcast listeners, you're not being able to see some of the videos that we got here because we're up here because we're trying to be a great show. We're trying to be a great broadcast for y'all because, we think that these things are important. So shout out to our podcast listeners. You've been riding for us way before we had a YouTube or a Patreon or any of that. So shout out to y'all. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can also check out Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins. That's right there. Boom, on InnerCityLeft.com. Great work of poetry by Emoja, Lil Tanky Sumler. We got music out there. Hit us up on our Spotify. And finally, let's give a huge shout out to our Patreon patrons who are holding us down. Y'all, we are getting close, I think, to 75 total patrons, and we were trying to get that thing to 100. We have free subscriptions if you're not ready to donate and things like that. It's okay. Just come vibe with us, be a part of our community because we want to build community because we care about y'all. We do this work not to be rich. Okay. Like if we were rich, we'd just be, if we wanted power and money, we would just be capitalists.
You're not going to see us at the Met Gala.
Why wouldn't I just talk about Ukraine or any of these other things in the way that the United States does? And then maybe we'd get some real freaking sponsorships up here.
Russia's so bad. Don't you understand? They're mean to gay people. Are they nice to gay people in America?
Yeah. Worry about yourself. We have a podcast called that. Worry about yourself. Worry about your country. Worry about your state. Worry about your city. Worry about your community. Worry about your family. And make sure you're out here, boy, BDS. Okay. And that includes places like Chick-fil-A. I don't want to hear nothing about anything unless you guys are boycotting Chick-fil-A. Okay. That's that. Shout out to y'all. Emoja, did we miss anything?
I mean, we missed that Russian response, but I know it's coming. Like night follows day. So look, don't none of y'all be wilding. Whoa, I can't believe what Russia done them.
Well, look, pay attention yourself. Look, we'll be talking about it on Inner City Left. Our next broadcast, I think, is going to be with Kita. So we'll definitely get to Ukraine at some point in the next week or so. Yes.
I did want to say this, though. I thought about it. One of the things that's happening right now is in the American-Iranian nuclear negotiations. One of the reasons why Iran has said they're unable to sign the American proposal is because it includes ambiguities, right? This goes back to what we're seeing with START, with the Russians. Just because you're promising America, you will not come to attack our nuclear facilities, which we'll clearly have marked out on a map and all of your investigators here whenever you want, right? This doesn't make any promises about NATO not doing it. It doesn't make any promises about Israel not preemptively doing it. And so you make this deal, and Lord knows, as soon as the Iranians retaliate against any type of NATO or Israeli adventure, then the Americans will come in. Well, we promised not to do a preeminent nuclear attack, and it's all of these things, as we say all the time, all of these things are connected.
Yeah, well said. For Emoji Lil Tanky Summer, I'm Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.